Greenland. The name sounds lush, doesn't it? But the reality is frozen. Over 1,000 years ago, a restless Viking named Erik the Red gave this harsh, icy island a friendly brand name. And believe it or not, people came. Was it a brilliant marketing campaign, savvy leadership, or just plain luck? This is the story of how a single name sold an entire colony. Erik the Red, better known to history as Erik the Red, was born around 950 CE in Norway, but grew up in Iceland. The Icelandic sagas paint a picture of a man with a fiery temper. After a series of killings and feuds, he was exiled from Iceland around the year 982. But instead of returning to Norway, Erik sailed west towards a vast, mysterious island on the fringes of the known world. It was a land that would become his chance for a fresh start. He spent his years of exile exploring its deep, sheltered fields. According to the sagas, he found regions with enough green pasture to support livestock, at least during the short summer. When his exile was over, Erik returned to Iceland not as a disgraced outcast, but as a promoter. He did what all great founders do. He told a compelling story. He didn't call the island Iceberg Alley or Frozen Wasteland. He called it Greenland. The sagas are surprisingly blunt about his logic, stating he believed people will be more attracted to go there if the land has a good name. And it worked. His sales pitch, promising available farmland in an increasingly crowded Iceland, was irresistible. Hundreds of families, farmers, craftsmen, and adventurers packed their lives onto longships and signed up to gamble on a new, if incredibly difficult, life. They sailed west following Erika's vision to settle in two main areas we now call the eastern and western settlements. Once there, the Norse colonists established farms in the most protected fjord, where a short but intense growing season allowed grass to grow. Archaeology shows us the remnants of their world: turf-walled houses, barns, and complex field systems. These finds are powerful evidence that Norse families brought European farming techniques and adapted them to the very edge of the Arctic. They raised sheep, goats, and a few precious cattle. But farming alone wasn't enough. They were also Arctic hunters, relying heavily on seals for meat and walruses for their valuable ivory tusks. They carved out a living on the absolute margin. The land could support them in good decades, but there was almost no room for error. A single bad winter or a failed hunt could be catastrophic. So, was calling it Greenland a cynical trick or just honest optimism? The truth is probably a bit of both. Erik likely saw genuine potential during a period we now call the medieval warm period, when temperatures were slightly milder. But giving it an aspirational name was a masterstroke of recruitment. It lowered the psychological barrier for settlers who were weighing the immense risk of uprooting their entire lives. In a medieval world guided by a persuasive founder with a good story could tip the balance between staying put and venturing into the unknown. Erik's brand worked for a few centuries. At least, the Norse Greenlanders were not isolated hermits. They were a connected part of the Viking world. They traded precious walrus, ivory, and rope with Europe in exchange for iron, timber, and grain. These trade routes were their lifeline. But they weren't the only people in Greenland. They also encountered the ancestors of today's Inuit, a highly skilled Arctic people often referred to by archaeologists as the Thule culture. While the sagas focused almost exclusively on Norse perspectives, archaeology tells a more complex story. The Norse and Inuit had long-term interactions, which included trade, cultural exchange, and almost certainly moments of conflict and competition for resources along the shared coastline. Ultimately, the story of Norse Greenland is an environmental one. The same medieval warm period that made settlement possible began to fade. Starting in the 13th century, the climate cooled, entering what we now call the Little Ice Age. Sea ice choked the shipping lanes for longer periods each year, and the short growing seasons became even shorter. This environmental stress was compounded by economic shocks. The market for walrus ivory in Europe collapsed as cheaper elephant ivory from Africa became available. The Black Death ravaged Europe, disrupting trade networks and severing contact. For a small, marginal economy like Greenland's, these combined pressures cascaded into a slow, grinding decline. By the 15th century, the Norse communities in Greenland had vanished. Their disappearance is one of history's great mysteries. Did they die out from starvation or conflict? Did they pack up and sail back to Iceland or Norway? Or did they assimilate into Inuit communities? Their Norse identity fading over generations? The evidence is fragmented and suggests a complex, uneven process. We see shifts in their diet, a shrinking population, and then a final, deafening silence in the European records. The epic saga of Erik the Red settlers ends not with a bang, but with a question mark that historians are still trying to answer. Yet Erik's marketing gambit had a lasting legacy. The name stuck. Greenland became the island's permanent identity in the European mind, a name that tells a story of hope and ambition, even if it was never the whole truth. Today, Greenland is a vibrant nation with a rich indigenous culture, a strategic Arctic position, and a front-row seat to the urgency of climate change. The Norse settlements are just one chapter in its long, resilient history, as modern Greenlanders reclaim their own powerful narratives about their land and their future. From a hot-headed exile to the founder of a miniature empire, Erik the Red's story shows us how names, narratives, and raw human ambition can literally reshape the map. Was his great venture a clever trick or a bold act of imagination? Perhaps it was both, and a powerful reminder that history is often made by those who know how to tell a good story. What do you think? Was Erik a marketing genius, an honest optimist, or a reckless gambler? Vote in our poll and let us know what part of this story surprised you the most. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind the myths.